right, good evening. Thank you for joining us for another episode of This Is What Democracy Looks Like. We are talking about immigration this month, and here with us tonight is Gigi Gardner of Gardner Law Firm. Thank you very much for being here with us tonight.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
So we wanted to talk to you a little bit. There's so much to cover with immigration, and so we're going to bounce around a little bit. We'll have a lot of information in the comments, a lot of links in here. So if we don't get to something, ask your question in the comments, and we'll follow up as well. It's a big topic, so we'll get to all we can. All right. Well, how long have you been practicing immigration law?
8 years.
8 years.
Mm-hmm.
And in that time, have you seen any major policy shifts that have changed either your work or the lives of your applicants or the way people apply as your clients?
Tons.
Okay.
So every major decision comes from the top down, and it affects a wide group of clients. So when I first started practicing, a big policy change was the 287G program that started where local sheriffs could screen people that they arrested and see if they had immigration status. And if they didn't, then they could hold them for up to 48 hours until ICE could come and pick them up after their criminal case was either dismissed or disposed, or if they posted bond, for example, they could continue holding them for up to 48 hours. So that caused a lot of people to be arrested. A lot of immigrants, actually, what happened locally is a lot of immigrants got picked up for minor traffic violations, whereas a U.S. citizen would not have been arrested for driving without having their driver's license on them. They would arrest someone that they thought didn't have lawful status just to get them in the jail, just to be able to...
Right, it was almost like arrested under suspicion of being an immigrant,
right,
is what it amounted to.
Right.
Right.
So that was a big policy change when I first started practicing. Then under Obama, there were several policy changes. For example, DACA, when he signed the executive order to institute DACA, then, thousands of people were able to get work permits. And then he tried to institute DAPA, which was deferred action for parents of U.S. citizens, and unfortunately that didn't hold up in the courts. But under Trump, most recently under the Trump administration, we've seen a few policy changes with him as well. We saw the travel ban that affected several of my clients who were from those countries that were on the travel ban, who are lawful permanent residents who happen they weren't necessarily abroad when the travel ban was instituted, but they were hoping to travel, and they had to cancel all of their plans because they were afraid that they wouldn't be let back in. And these are people who are longtime residents of the United States, who have green cards, who are here lawfully and have abided by all the laws. So the travel ban was a recent thing, and also the most recently the ending of DACA. Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced late last year that they would be ending DACA. So right now, the government is not accepting any new applications for DACA.
Right, and that was actually going to be my next question, is that, the history of it is really long, but just, we've seen it, we've seen DACA in the courts last month as well. Mm-hmm. What's the latest on, so you said no new applicants.
Right.
What else is going on?
So there's several lawsuits right now in federal courts across the country, and the latest is that in addition to there not being any new DACA applications, Under the Trump administration, they announced that they were going to end DACA renewals as well. But that so far has been stopped in federal courts. And the federal courts have said that until this can all be played out in the judicial system, that the Trump administration cannot just end DACA renewals without the proper procedures in place.
Right.
So as of right now, if anyone has DACA currently, then they can continue renewing it, assuming that they still meet all of the requirements.
Right. And tell us what a couple of those requirements are, because I think that's pretty important. People maybe don't know what it takes. So these are working, tax paying, or students, or...
Yeah, so you had to have arrived in the United States before you turned 16 years old. You had to have you have to have graduated from a high school or gotten the equivalent, like a GED, or you have to be currently enrolled in high school or a GED program. You can't have committed any significant misdemeanors or other felonies. And you also have to have proved that you have resided in the United States continuously for a certain amount of time. So there's a lot of requirements that people have to prove in order to meet it. It's not as easy to get DACA as some people might think.
And I wanted to make that point here, at least, that this is not a free pass. It's not an easy thing to do. And in fact, of most of the people here as immigrants, DACA covers very few percentage-wise. Yes. I mean, I don't know the numbers, but probably less than 10,000, I would think.
Yeah, I'm not sure. There's different numbers. I'm not sure exactly how many people have DACA. I know that it's estimated that there are anywhere from 11 to 12 million undocumented immigrants total in the country. I'm not exactly sure how many of those have DACA.
Okay.
But it is this very small number.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned a minute ago, and we were talking about policy shifts over time.
Yes.
You mentioned a bill that went through or was proposed for DAPA for the parents. And that actually gets to another question I think a lot of us have asked. We've seen in the news quite a bit this idea of chain migration.
Yes.
And so if you have a family member who is here legally trying to, use that person's status to get other family here. And I think people have a lot of knee-jerk reactions when they hear a phrase like that. What would, I guess maybe just talk to us a little bit about chain migration, what the proper term is for it.
It's actually family-based immigration.
Well, that doesn't sound anywhere near as bad as chain.
It's not.
Right?
It's
exactly.
not. It's not a bad thing at all. It's been around since I think since the turn of the 20th century. Family-based immigration is just the laws that allow U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents to bring their immediate family here. So it's only for immediate family, which includes parents, children, spouses, and siblings. That's it. It's your immediate nuclear family.
Right.
And actually, you can only petition for your sibling if you're a U.S. citizen. If you're a lawful permanent resident, you can only petition for your spouse and your children.
Right.
And that's it.
So very limited.
Your unmarried children.
Yeah. So that's very limited. When we hear it kind of bandied about in the news, it's this idea that, well, you just get one person in the United States and then we'll just, you'll be able to get 30 more through. It's just hogwash. Right?
It is.
I mean, it's really for immediate families. And when we talk about, stability and paying taxes and being a part of the community, having your family together is certainly ideal no matter who you are.
Right. I mean, it's ridiculous to think that, first of all, for U.S. citizens, if I'm a U.S. citizen, how and we this happens all the time. How is the U.S. government going to tell me that I can't bring my parent over here? That if my parent is getting older, and they need medical care or medical attention. They need someone, or they just need someone to take care of them. They want to live with their child, or for example, like an LPR, like a lawful permanent resident, someone who gets their lawful permanent residency through a job, through an employer, and they come here as a doctor or a dentist or a scientist, and the federal government, we're going to say, you can come, but you can't bring your wife and your kids, or your husband and your kids.
Right.
It's inhumane.
Right, it absolutely is. And I think in those cases in particular, it cuts down on the specific talent that we can bring here too, if people aren't allowed to have their families with them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a common misconception these days. It seems that there have been rumors spread that an immigrant, once they get their residency or their citizenship, that they can petition for aunts, uncles, and cousins, and all these distant relatives, for an infinite amount of distant relatives, and that's just not true.
Yeah. And
it also, to end family-based immigration, completely goes against our morals as a country to support family reunification and to keep families together.
Right, and there's been some provision for this, you said, since the beginning of the 20th century, but really since immigration in the United States at all, right?
Yeah.
There's been some form of this.
Mm-hmm.
So you started talking a little bit about misconceptions. What are some of the other really big misconceptions that are out there, either about, any kind of immigrants, refugees, asylees, or immigration law?
Okay, well, starting with refugees and asylees, a lot of people think that they don't get screened, that there's no vetting process for refugees when they're coming into the country.
That's a big one.
And that's completely false. They go through probably the most rigorous vetting of all immigrants coming into the country. So that's a big misconception. It's also a common myth that if we ban refugees, that somehow that's going to keep us safe from terrorism, which is also not true. The refugee system is not related to terrorism that happens here at all. I don't think there hasn't been a single refugee that's committed a terrorist act in the United States.
And sorry to cut you off, but what is the difference between a refugee and an asylee? I think that's something that people maybe don't know either.
There's only one difference, and it's a minor distinction. They're the same group of people. Mm-hmm. It just depends on where they're applying from.
Okay.
So if they're still abroad and they're facing persecution in their home country and they're afraid to return to their home country and they're applying to the U.S. to let them in, then they're considered a refugee.
Right.
So they're still abroad. They're outside the United States. If somehow they have managed to get onto American soil, mm-hmm. one way or another, they've gotten into the United States, they still fear persecution in their home country. At that point, once they're in the United States, they're called an asylee. And
yes.
Other than that, there's really no difference.
Okay, so once they're here, they're an asylum seeker.
Right.
And if they're abroad, still refugee.
Right.
Okay, thank you for clearing that. But I'm not sure, a lot of people kind of use them interchangeably. Mm-hmm. So that was a good one. What about some of the other misconceptions around immigration?
Gosh, there's so many. Okay, so a big one I think is that there's this line that people can get into in order to get their papers. And for most people that are here, that are out of status or undocumented, there is no available path for them to become legal. I meet with clients every day who, as much as they want to become legal, there's absolutely no law on the books that allows them to get their residency.
And so they're sort of stuck then.
Yes. They're stuck because their families are here. Most of these people are in mixed families, so where they have some people that are U.S. citizens, some people that are lawful permanent residents, and then some that are undocumented. So it's an entire mix of immigration status or U.S. citizenship. And all they want to do is be in the country that they call home and be with their family and continue working where they've been working for the past 20 plus years or so. Another misconception is that undocumented or immigrants in general, especially undocumented immigrants, are taking our jobs. You hear that often, and
yes, very often.
Yes, it's not true. Most undocumented immigrants that are working here in the U.S. are working in very low-skilled manual labor jobs that most U.S. citizens aren't willing to do, and that's due to the United States becoming more educated as a population. We are becoming more educated, and we're seeking higher skilled jobs, and there's a shortage of workers for low skilled jobs.
Yes, and so sometimes that's even the people who have tremendous, really highly skilled backgrounds, but because of the language barrier or because of their immigration status, are working more manual labor type of jobs. So I know you see that as well.
Yes.
I like that you brought up this idea of get in line. There isn't a line, right? Mm-hmm. Or immigrants are taking our jobs. Not really, mm-hmm. right? What are some of the most maybe like the most heartbreaking type of stories that you see with your clients? What makes it hard to keep doing this job?
A lot. There's a lot of heartbreaking stories, and a lot of my colleagues, we talk about this constantly, about the secondary trauma that we suffer just listening to their stories. But I think recently, probably the most heartbreaking stories are all the stories of the refugees that are running from Central America, that are escaping severe harassment, torture, persecution, horrible violence, rape, murder, beatings, and they're running here thinking that the United States can protect them, and most of the time they're women and children. And as soon as they get here, they're getting detained, they're getting put in jail, and they're being forced to recount over and over again these horrific acts that have happened to them, and they're talking to law enforcement, or they're talking to lawyers about the things that have happened to them, and they're getting re-traumatized every single time they have to talk about it.
And a lot of times, like you said, it's women and children, and a lot of times the people they're forced to speak to are men, which is not always culturally easy, especially when you're fleeing sex trafficking, things like that, right?
Yes.
And so people come here and they're desperate, and then they sort of get re-traumatized.
They do.
By the system. That's really...
They do,
hard.
And there's no right to a public defender or an appointed immigration lawyer, so to speak. So in immigration proceedings, if they're in the process of being deported, they have to hire their own lawyer. There are some pro bono attorneys, but there's not nearly enough to support all the people that need representation. So they end up spending tens of thousands of dollars on their cases, and they're fighting an uphill battle. And if they try to do it on their own, the chances of them getting approved are slim to none. And they have the most horrific stories that you would ever imagine. And oftentimes I have to tell them that it's going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars, and they've just literally just gotten here, and they don't have a job. They're living with a cousin or a friend, or someone is just literally giving them a bed to sleep in.
It's really hard in a lot of ways, and I think one of the biggest ones that maybe everyone should think about is, what does that say about us as a nation of immigrants? What does that say about us when we're willing to turn away people who, or re-traumatize people who have been through so much? I mean, a lot of this is a reflection on ourselves too, and I think that's something important that people should maybe ask or think, about for themselves too. What kinds of changes do we really need in this type of immigration system?
It is extremely sad.
It really is. So, somehow we're already at time, but I wanted to ask you, things change so frequently. It's got to be really hard to advise your clients with, changes happening every day. You hear all these sad stories. What keeps you going through those times? What is it that keeps you in this job every day?
I absolutely love what I do. And the immigrants themselves keep me going. My clients keep me going. I love being able to help them. And anytime I'm able to get someone a green card or citizenship, it makes me so happy, because that's one more person I was able to give a better opportunity to.
Just give them a chance.
Yes. That's all they're looking for. And that's what keeps me going.
So for you, it's not necessarily a success in that, hey, you won a dream job and you've won the lottery or anything else. It's just the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's important. I think that's what immigrants are really looking for, is the opportunity. It's not a handout. It's not stepping in line. It's not any of those things. It's just the chance. Thank you so much for being with us. And I know this is a huge topic, so we will have a lot of links on here. We'll have some common misconceptions, some links to resources, a little bit more about sanctuary cities. There'll be quite a bit posted in links and on our page tomorrow. So thank you all for joining us. I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.